Secretary. We are thrilled to have you. And I just want to start by thanking you for your last answer and for standing up for equality for every single one of our kids. I want to specifically ask you to start off about the serious shortage of mental health professionals. I am so pleased to see a $1 billion request to increase the number of those professionals in school settings. But I'm interested in how, if you have thought about strategies as Secretary of Education for increasing and addressing the shortage of mental health professionals overall as we are looking to increase them in our schools.
Thank you, Congresswoman Clark. So, I'll start by saying when I visited this last month and a half, I visited about 9 states, 10 different schools. And one thing that came out loud and clear is the need for our schools to look different than they were prior to March 2020. And one of those differences is the need for better social emotional supports, better mental health supports. Our students are in greater need there. So your question is a very good one. How do we create the capacity there? How do we look to connect our K-12 institutions with our institutions of higher education to make sure that we're preparing enough professionals to fill the demand that we have in our schools to meet the social emotional needs of our students? So we need to be creative about creating pipeline programs, ensuring that our students have pathways in our K-12 systems to get into the higher education space around that social emotional support or degrees in school counseling, social work. That's critically important. Not only do we have to rethink our organizational structure for our schools, but we also have to create clear pipelines for our students who are in school now to think of themselves as future mental health professionals.
Thank you so much for that and for your emphasis on it. And we know this has been a time that has really inflicted great trauma and as always, even more so on low-income children and children of color. We look at nearly 40,000 children in this country have lost at least one parent, and Black children account for 20% of those kids. And we know that trauma is at the base of sometimes behavioral issues at school. And the previous administration rescinded Obama-era guidance on disciplinary practice that warned schools they may be violating federal civil rights if one racial group was overrepresented in disciplinary actions taken. As Secretary of Education, will you restore that guidance on school discipline and update it to address policing in schools?
I remember being an assistant superintendent when I read that and was shocked, because our efforts were really to try to reduce disparities in exclusionary practices. We know students of color, students with disabilities are targeted differently, and discrimination of any form is unacceptable, including of our LGBTQ and trans students. So yes, this is a high priority for me to make sure that all students have a fair shake. Yes, we're going to make sure that accountability is there. We're going to make sure that education and support to our systems are there. And that's what this American Families Plan and American Rescue Plan can do. Training to help our educators understand the differences of what trauma looks like and what poor behavior looks like, so that we can meet the needs of our students where they are, especially after this pandemic. With regard to your question about school resources and school resource officers in schools, listen, this was one that I'm going to need more information. I've seen examples of where it's very helpful to have members of the school community in the school helping the learning happen, including police officers, resource officers. But I've also seen examples where it worsens the disparities in exclusionary practices. So more to come on that, but I definitely want to hear more.
And in my few remaining seconds, I cannot tell you what it means to have an administration that understands the value of early education. Most of that funding and oversight resides in HHS. If you could just briefly tell us how we can support your work in collaboration around early ed with Health and Human Services.
Thank you. The research and the practice around early childhood education there's a huge gap there. And for us, it's really about making sure we're creating that culture of understanding of how important early childhood education is in our country for our young learners. We know students that have access to high quality instructional programs at the early ages, do better in high school. They get honors courses. Their potential for college is greater. So continue to beat that drum with us. Make sure that we're supporting programs that have high quality, and making sure that as the money makes its way to the states, that they're being invested in high quality programs. That's how you can support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Congressman Fleischman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, congratulations.